A lot of the atheists, a lot of the, the Dawkinses, the Daniel Dennets, the Hitchens, these kind of atheists, Sam Harris, these kinds of philosophers and thinkers, they believe that all that exists is just pure, random, chaotic matter. If that's the case, then that leads to certain conclusions about reality. For example, we don't actually have free will. We don't actually make choices. And many of those philosophers are actually pretty consistent with that. If you think about, for example, Sam Harris says, yeah, there is no free will. And that we think we're learning things is an illusion. We're not really learning truths and discovering things. We think we are, but we're just really a determined chemical process doing that. We're under the delusion that we've made these discoveries and choices. Of course, if he was to really apply that to his own life, then he wouldn't be able to say that he wrote his books. He's not actually arguing for anything that he discovered because there aren't really any discoveries. There's no true versus false. There's only determined chemical process. So in other words, this is called the determinist fallacy or the naturalist fallacy. This would undermine the possibility of having knowledge at all if the materialist worldview were the case. You also couldn't get morals from this worldview. There was a famous atheist philosopher named David Hume in the Enlightenment, and he raised this question. It's called the is-ought dilemma. And he pointed out that, hey, we atheists, we got to be more consistent. We're calling out these religious believers, but look, we don't have a basis for right and wrong. The fact that reality is just matter in motion, it doesn't tell you that it should be some other way. And since there's nothing about molecules themselves that tell you that they ought to be in some other configuration, if all that exists is molecules in motion, there's no basis for saying that they ought to be some other way. Therefore, you can't derive an ought, a moral obligation, something right or something wrong, from what is the case, from just a bunch of molecules.